it is important to understand the term public policy. Everything revolves around this. The chapter itself is known as public policy. So when chapter itself is known as public policy, so public policy may not only be definition, or public policy may not only be what we are saying. That's why gradually we'll try to expand it and tell what exactly public policy is. So that day also we introduced a bit and we told about public policy. You know policies. You know several policies, but conceptually we are first time explaining about public policy. And it has its various dimensions. So in general, when we define public policy, the public policy will have this common statement, objectives, process, guidelines, implementation mechanism, like say in National Health Policy 2017. If you see, so what is that? It aims at health for all. Its objective is that health for all. It will set goals, aims, objectives. So if you read that policy, so you will find that it will have aims, objectives, values, principles. That is the values component. No, if you read any policies, what they write? Policies are a set of promises. Then they make the promises. Since you may not have read, we know that health policy. What is that health policy? So if you look into that, it talks for health for all. Then it has 7 principles. It mentions 7 principles. First principle is about values and ethics. So since we also relate in ethics paper, anyhow, so policy is setting some principles, some values, some goals. This is how. Then they will go and give the statements like guidelines type of statement. That mortality rate will be reduced, birth rate, mortality rate, right? Then you can say this various other types of things, expectancy, life expectancy. And then they will say that we will spend, as of now, government spends 1.5% of GDP. They may aim at 2.5% of GDP. So this is how they will do. Then how we will achieve? So just we have written PPP, but they will try to enhance public health system, the public health system, institutions, that health insurance, public institution, private institution, medicine sector, regulatory sector. They will go on dealing with various sectors. That how they will achieve this, and that is how we can say that a policy. So public policy is, what is this? But it is not a binding document. It is not a law. It is just a policy. A law can also be policy. Right? Like say farm bills. The farm bills we say policy also, law also. This we have to understand. So a policy is nothing but a statement, let's say. It can be a statement, it can be a document, it can be law, it can be guidelines, whatever we can say, which government adopts, and that will have common objectives. It will have objectives, aims, objectives, process, guidelines, implementation mechanism, institutions, all sort of things mentioned. That is how we mean by public policy. But since public policy is not only a course of action, you should know that. Public policy is not only a course of action. Public policy also has broad connotation. Right. So, it has a very broad connotation. Like first, So, when we have to define public policy, it means public policy is defined the way we have told. It is a broad course of action, future of action, which consists of a statement of objectives, values, goals, and a set of guidelines. But the term public administration connotes different things, means it deals with the whole gamut of components associated with public policy. Like process of public policy, that is called cycle of public policy. The public policy itself has its cycle. Then how, let's say that key, how a policy should be made, what is a good policy. So how we can make that policy? So let's say national health policy. So national health policy has been made, formulated. What is the process we have followed in formulating that? So it is concerned about that model. So there are various models, or there are various theories which have emerged explaining public policy, so that a public policy or any policy can be drafted in better fashion. So that is how it deals with also public policy models, how policy is made. So public policy term is not only a statement, but it is also a process. It also represents methods, theories. Then it also, let's say, it will deal with aims, goals, objectives, decisions. So that aspect, then types, there can be some types of public policy that will also say it deals with policy analysis, feedback. The public policy also has its own, let's say that key analysis. There will be policy analysis also, policy evaluation also, feedback also, and then final implementation also. Hence we say that it deals with the whole gamut of all those components which are associated with public policy. So public policy can be considered as a very broad term, very, let's say that key generic term, you can say that, which deals with the entire gamut. Hence a definition cannot include all, means scope of public policy. Any statement cannot manifest the scope of public policy. A statement can manifest certain aspects of public policy, but it cannot completely define, means no definition is complete to include the entire gamut of public policy. So that's why when we will say a one or two definition or this or that definitions, by that definition you will not still understand that what exactly public policy, or by that we cannot define the field of public policy. Those public policy definitions are largely related with definition. That is, those definitions are largely dealing with decisions. Like that day we told that public policy, so one definition we said authoritative allocation of values among people. The authoritative allocation of values among people, so it is a kind of decision making. Or we told that public policy means humanization of society. The humanization of society is about basically bringing development, eliminating, let's say, backwardness at sectors, that Loswell definition. If I read one, two more other definitions, so that will also not, let's say that be able to. So if you take specific definitions, as we told about David Easton. It's the authoritative allocation of values. Values are here resources. This Loswell humanization of society. This Thomas Dye. Right.  'Cause 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 'c or not to do. These are some popular examples. They have already been asked as question. Means this one has been asked as question. We expect questions on. So, what they are indicating? Let's say that given Thomas Dye talks that policy is what governments choose to do. Even those who they do not do, means even indecision is also a decision, as we have told that. So, when government decides not to do something, it is also a policy. What it decides to do is also a policy, but what it decides not to do is also a policy. This. But then it relates to decisions, isn't it? The definitions are more relating to decisions. But public policy is not only related to decisions. The present understanding is, already we have asked a question, public policy goes beyond this also. So, that public policy is not merely about what governments decide to do or not to do. Then what does it mean? So, that is what we have to understand. Although you have to, when questions are asked, you have to explain them. You have to write about public policy. Still level of knowledge is not adequate that you will be able to explain. Let's further, we will explain it. So, then we'll understand this, the definitions we can explain later on, or self-explanatory it can be after some time. Then the question is that, or let's write few lines this, that although public policy is defined by thinkers more in terms of decision making like authoritative allocation of resources, or what governments choose to do or not to do. Which indicate public policy in terms of a broad course of action in which there is government decision making, However, if one analyzes the term public policy from today's perspective, when the field of public policy has emerged as a separate field in public administration, then such definitions would not be able to encompass the whole gamut of the term public policy, which has a very broad connotation, which has a very broad connotation consisting of the components as mentioned above. Consisting of the components as mentioned above. Then the question arises, why and when the field of public policy emerged, and when thinkers started defining the term public policy. Change paragraph. The field has its emergence during 1950s. The field has its emergence during 1950s, especially after World War II. Pioneered by Harold Loswell and Theodore Lowy. Loswell is basically considered pioneer of the field of public policy. The objective was to establish a separate field of policy science. The objective was to establish a separate field of policy science which should have both descriptive and prescriptive analysis of the field of public policy, analysis of policy making of government, so that government was able to formulate good policies. Good policy. If governments are able to take good policy decisions, then there would be better implementation. Gradually the field experienced two paradigms, incremental and rational. Incrementalists and rationalists, which developed models and theories for formulation of good public policy. Good public policies. Thinkers also focused on analyzing the processes of public policy. policies. Right. Implementation of public policy and evaluation. For which models were also developed. And therefore, the entire field of public policy emerged. Aiming at improving government public policy. Government public policy. Its origin is traced. From Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, and in modern times, social contract school like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, and then public policy thinkers like Harold Loswell, Thomas Dye, Lindblom, and Rod. That is, before emergence of the field of public policy, the political philosophers right, dealt with government policy decisions, which was focused on how a state could deliver better, And when the field of public policy emerged, it was also about state and government. That how governments can formulate good policies and also implement them effectively. And hence the term public in public policy has also a broad connotation. It not only relates to government, but also it relates to state and people relationship, means it relates to government and people relationships, that how government can improve lives of people through its policies. Like the Congress government the Congress government in first 5-6 decades, and the present government, in over 6-7 years, through their policies, how they have improved the life of people. How they have improved the life of people. The effectiveness and improvement of life of people would depend ultimately on first, whether governments were able to have right policy interventions, governments were able to have right policy interventions. Second, whether policies were clear in their objectives, or they had vagueness. Next, whether policies were implemented effectively. For instance, it is said that adoption of socialist pattern of development was not a right policy decision. Second, the new economic policy has not been implemented in desired manner. Next, the present government is characterized by radical policy decisions with success of some policies. But at the same time, there are also failures like of demonetization. Change paragraph. Therefore, in ultimate analysis, the term public policy is not only about the way thinkers have defined like it is course of action. Rather, it encompasses the whole gamut of public policy. Which ultimate aim is according to Loswell, humanization of society. That how good society has been established. However, even if public policy has broad connotation, still, when the term public policy is defined, it broadly takes into consideration broadly takes into consideration the components of goals and objectives and guidelines for achieving them. So, is it making sense? Are you able to understand what we are saying? So, yes, any reaction? Are you able to understand? So, what we are trying to say, if you see some applied that aspect we have mentioned. So, how we say ki socialist pattern, it is a criticism. We say socialist pattern policy was not a right policy intervention, right? Or we say recently 30 years of new economic policy has been celebrated. So many articles have been written on 30 years of new economic policy. And they will say that this we have achieved like this, we have failed like this, or we have not been able to achieve the way we wanted by new economic policy because growth rate has been still 7%. Then present government is characterized by, so basically what public policy is what we are trying to say, or we have tried to link with from past also. Let's say public policy, the public has a special character. Even a basic question can be asked that what is public in public policy? Or public in public policy lends a special character to the field of public policy. So that way also a question can be asked. Right? We have already asked this. And I still remember people are not able to, कुछ समझ में नहीं आता है लोगों को किसका मतलब क्या है. They don't answer anything like. So public in public policy lends a special character to the field of public policy. Elucidate. Right. So there are some broader, let's say, means we should have some broader understanding. Broader understanding in the sense means we have to understand what we are trying to say. So basically, let's say that before 1950s there was no field of public policy. It is a new field in public administration. There was no policy science. It is a new thing, new development. So before that there were thinkers, even let's say Kautilya, but since West literature did not include Kautilya, rather they will include largely Western philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, and social contract theories, Thomas Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and modern times when we have dictated some of the thinkers' name of public policy. So basically, if you find that when we are mentioning these things, so what we have tried to say that when there was, means when if you take ancient time, what Kautilya was trying to describe through Arthashastra, the main essence of Arthashastra is that how a state can be governed better. The how a state can be governed better. So how a state can be governed better? The state should have good policy. First, policy implementation first demand policy. And policy demands that you should have some goals, objectives, values. No. Like say we have adopted constitution. The constitution is the most important policy document of the country. Can we say? Constitution is the most important policy document of the government, which guides the government. No, it is also a document, a legal document. So, let's say it is itself the most important. But how it has been formulated? It has a long history. History means the constitution as itself has a long history. So basically what we are trying to say, linking public policy. The public means it is related to government. But it is not only about government. It's about government and people relationship. Public policy deals relationship between government and people. Any policy will deal government and people relationship. Right. And in that aim is to improve the life of people. Isn't it? The constitution is also a document between government and people. And its aim is to improve the life of people. This. So any public policy is nothing but a document, we can say that, which has been adopted on the basis of its let's say past developments related to we can say research, analysis, thinking, decision, then a policy is adopted. So there is a process before policy is adopted. And once policy is adopted, then there is also a process. Isn't it? So public policy has also a process. Because public policy does not come in vacuum. Right. Any policy document, even constitutions, the constitution came with a process. Constituent assemblies, subcommittees, this and that, then finally constitution is adopted. Once constitution has been adopted, then we are trying to implement constitution. Isn't it? So public policy is, yes, it is a government document, but it deals with the relationship between government and people. Its ultimate aim is to improve the life of people. So how we analyze, let's say, some episodic things like, as we have told, first 40 years. और आजकल कैसे बोला जाता है पॉलिटिक्स में, कांग्रेस ने कुछ किया नहीं, राइट? सो कांग्रेस ने 60 years में क्या किया? तो you have to see major aspect ना, कि what were their policy decisions. If they had a wrong policy decision, so we say it was a wrong policy intervention. The wrong policy decision may not result into right achievement of objectives. Similarly, new economic policy, even present government is characterized, it is characterized with radical policy decisions. And radical policy decisions, yes, there are good outcomes also. We find in some sectors good outcomes. The life of people, whether it has improved or it has become worse. The essence of any policy is that whether the life of people has improved. This. And then the policy, many a time you find that a policy is vague, a policy is good. Many a time you characterize it. You say that, oh, this policy is good. But many a time, so policy is vaguely worded. So when policy is vaguely worded, so it will not be implemented properly. Like say demonetization. So demonetization, its objectives were so flawed objectives. Demonetization se black money वापस आएगा. Then its objectives were changed. Right. This. So it is a policy for knowing bad aspect, failure of policy. If you want to understand failure of policy, so demonetization in recent times can be the best example. If you want to success of the policy, the many schemes and programs of the present government, including what we have told in case of Swachh Bharat Mission, Ujjwala scheme and Jan Dhan Mission and others, or let's say even government has this minimum government, maximum governance policy as a philosophy, let's say that. So we can have some, let's say that example, GST we can have, IBC we can have. So there can be good policy design. Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana has a good policy design. So when Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana has a good policy design, so it is effective, it has effective implementation. But Manrega does not have a good policy design, it is not as effective as Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. This we have told. So, but let's say that a policy was designed, how Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana was designed. So by that way you can understand also, if a policy has good policy design or it is good, means the policy is clearly stated. The difference between Manrega and Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana is that in Gram Sadak Yojana, things are very objectively stated, clearly stated. And let's say that objectives, parameters, guidelines, institutions, they have been very clearly stated. But if you take Manrega, so things have not been clearly stated. Like say one difference is that in Manrega, what is the work, means what would be the work taken and what would be the quality of work It is not defined properly. But so here work quality is not defined, but here road quality is properly defined. Okay. The road, let's say that its quality means quality is properly defined, plus its evaluation is properly defined, which institution will evaluate, and plus maintenance, let's say that maintenance is also defined, maintenance budget is given. But in Manrega, let's say that these things have not been clearly stated. When they have not been clearly stated, so this is how it is said that we'll tell also when we'll talk about policy implementation and there, so we'll formally take this Manrega and PMGS. But just to tell in outset that if a policy is designed properly, framed properly, it has better implementation possibility. If policy is poorly designed and vaguely worded, even if Manrega is having so much appeal and it is having good implementation, but vis-a-vis Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, it is not as effectively implemented. This you should know. जबकि यहाँ पार्टिसिपेशन है, यहाँ पार्टिसिपेशन नहीं है. यहाँ सोशल ऑडिट है, यहाँ सोशल ऑडिट नहीं है. Means it is a centralized policy, it is a decentralized policy. It is a manifestation that even if a policy does not have people participation, it is centralized, it can be effectively implemented. And even if a policy is decentralized, has people participation, may not be effectively implemented. But those debates we'll talk later on. At this stage, we are just trying to explain that public policy term. And that public policy term is very broad, it has long history, and let's say thinkers were talking in essence that how state can improve and deliver, and then state has to take policy decisions, formulate policies, and ultimately let's say the ultimate analysis we can know, because a government can formulate hundreds of policy, each and every policy we may not evaluate, but we can say in summary all the policies and their effect on life of people, whether life of people has improved or not. And that is how the aim of the policies, ultimately improving the life of people. We have to make life of people better. Each policy can have specific objectives, but ultimate aim is to make the life of people better. We say happy and prosperous. The people life should be happy and prosperous. Manrega can have objective of providing, let's say 1 million people job, but let's say ultimate objective is being people should be happy, prosperous society. This we can say. And that is how let's say public policy we should understand in this broad sense. So is it making sense? Are you able to understand?
Sir, here public means like members of parliament, how rational they are.
No. Public means not members.
Any special character to the field of public policy?
Public lends a special character because it means how policy is made, who are the policy makers, the process of policy making, the values, goals of the policy, policy implementation, and policy outcomes. And all such things deal with public. Public means people. That is how a special character.
It has nothing to do with government functionaries.
Yes?
It has nothing to do with government functionaries, only people here.
No. Government, without government, how there can be public policy? It is the government which makes policy. So it will determine the relationship between government and people. In first, public policy, public means it is a government policy. Any public policy is a government policy first. Second, that government policy means policy is made by government. Third, that policy deals with the relationship between government and people. Fourth, that it is about the common objectives. It deals with common objectives. And fifth, it can have some guidelines. Can we say? So let's write. Let me tell that. A public policy with a special public character public character can have following characteristics. Can have following characteristics. Characteristics like first, it is government policy. Second, policies are made by government. Policies are made by government. Next, it deals with government and people relationship. Next, it has common objectives and goals. Next, policies are largely implemented by government machineries. Next, it deals with implementation and its effects on life of people. Right, that is change in paragraph. The essence of any policy is, public policy is whether it has improved life of people. So, should we take next? यस, ये तो पॉलिटिकल साइंस का है, पब्लिक एड में हमने जबरदस्ती लाया है. The first school is political science, that is called incrementalist model. Means as a field it emerged in political science. But since public administration it deals with policy making, and as we have told that time that we cannot completely separate politics and administration. So now you will understand it better why politics and administration cannot be separated, right? Which we teach in first few classes, right? Without understanding public administration. Right? Now you have the understanding of public administration, so now you can understand that how it cannot be separated. Policy making and policy implementation. Yes.
Sir, that public means government and its relation with people, right?
Yes.
Sir, anything else?
Anything else is what we have told. अभी तो बहुत सारे चीज बोलने वाले हैं हम लोग, बस जब तक चैप्टर चलेगा सब कुछ रहेगा एनीथिंग एल्स में. बिकॉज इसके बाद जो मैं बताने जा रहा हूँ वो थोड़ा डिफिकल्ट है. दैट्स व्हाई आई एम आस्किंग कि वेदर यू आर अंडरस्टैंडिंग. राइट, सो difficulty is yet to come. Challenge is now thereafter. So let's take conceptual aspects. overlap, you can relate it. It's not important whether they overlap, but just you can relate it, that's all. Rather, what we are saying is all the three are part of public policy. Means all the three will be, public policy will involve aims, goals, objectives. Right. Goals I have not written. Goals also you can write one more, you can draw. Public policy, but still they are different. Still they are different. Like let's write. Although public policy involves decision making, and it has goals, objectives, aims. Still public policy is different from decision making. Public policy is different from first decision making, second aims, goals and objectives. Aims, goals and objectives. Right. This is what we can say. So let's understand one by one. So when we talk, let's say public policy. So we say it as course of action. Broad guideline, blueprint or document. Like National Health Policy. National Health Policy. Okay. The third, there is also policy process. Policy process consisting of this agenda setting, policy making, policy execution, policy monitoring, policy evaluation, yes. It is called policy process or policy cycle. So this is before policy making. And this is after policy making. Means by the time we'll deal it, a bit more knowledge you will have in public policy, then you will understand the differences. That is what I thought. Means now I should first tell other things so that you understand something about public policy. Then we can talk about differences. So कोई भी पॉलिसी, लेट्स से दैट कि कोई भी पॉलिसी बनता है तो पॉलिसी बनने से पहले लेट्स देयर इज अ प्रोसेस दैट इज बिफोर पॉलिसी मेकिंग प्रोसेस. दिस एजेंडा सेटिंग, this will be, let's say, largely dominated by government. Right. So ये largely it will be dominated by government. Policy decisions are taken by government. No. Government. In government you can have legislature and executive. The executive has its own think tank. Think tank like say Niti Aayog. Right. Ministry of Finance for budget. Right. Plus independent, right, research institutions. Research institutions, right, like Center for Policy Research. Right. Then plus, if you remember, the interest groups, intergroups, pressure groups, like civil society organization. एजेंडा सेटिंग. एजेंडा सेटिंग क्या है? बिगिनिंग, ट्रिगर पॉइंट, ट्रिगर फॉर मेकिंग. So this agenda can be set, although I will separately talk this agenda. Here let's say that there will be participation of either government or non-state actors. Non-state actors. It is dominated by bureaucracy. Policy implementation is dominated by bureaucracy, and this will be dominated by government plus non-state actors. Non-state actors. Government like say economic survey, Non-state actors, let's say TIS and devolution index. They can work as policy monitoring evaluation. So many things are involved in public policy. There can be a definition, let's say we can define. The definition is only indicating towards this aspect, authoritative allocation of values. The definition that we are saying, so what governments choose to do and not to do, it's about decision. But public policy has its cycle, process. Right? Because what choose to do, not to do also depends on feedback. Feedback, isn't it? Anyhow, let's take agenda setting. Let's try that. It is a stage. It is a stage, right, before taking policy decision. It is a stage before taking policy decision. That policy decisions are not taken in vacuum. Policy decisions are not taken in vacuum. Rather, there is also a process. There is also a process before taking any policy decision. Before taking any policy decision or formulating policy. Right. That is known as agenda setting. Agenda setting, which means setting agenda for policy making. Setting agenda for policy making. A trigger point for considering anything or a new thing for making policy. This trigger can be by first any policy evaluation feedback. Second, any new incidents in society. Next, new incidents in society. Next, the government electoral agenda. Next, a new government coming to powers with new agenda. Next, non-state actors, reports, pressures, like media, civil society, business organizations. For instance, the present government had some new agendas before coming to powers in 2014. 2014. When it came to power, the electoral mandate on its agendas can be considered as agenda setting, for which it had to formulate policies. Next, any developments in society can trigger agenda, like India against corruption movement and enactment of Lokpal Act 2013. Next, farm bills protest and its withdrawal to review farm bills. Next, farmers' suicide related to BT cotton and government policy related to GM crops. Therefore, agenda setting is a development which results into government decision to go for making a policy, or even government can decide not yet to make policy. And indecision is also considered as a policy. That is, not to choose as per Thomas Dye. For example, government set up law commission to look into possibility of adopting uniform civil code. The law commission recommended neither feasible nor desirable. And hence, government has not gone ahead for adopting a common civil code, even if there is public pressure. So, are you able to understand agenda setting? Agenda setting is the stage or a step before policy making. Means before policy is adopted, policy is framed. It means, let's say that many a time we can, to make any policy, first you have to take yes, you have to say yes. No, let's say government itself has its agenda. But on all its agenda, it does not make policy. You should know that. Because some of their agenda, they do not make policy. And some agendas, they make policy. Why they are not making policy? They are waiting for right time. Or it may not be right time. This. So, government has agendas. That is how agenda already set in electoral democracy. So, in electoral democracy, already agendas are set because of electoral agendas they have before elections. And once let's say that they are voted for that, so it means their agenda is set to make policy on those agendas. But they are not only determining factors. Governments are getting floods of let's say that reports, recommendations, reviews, pressures. The government is getting let's say that different from, it can be let's say that from Chief Justice. So, another let's say that. So, you know that what it has resulted into. So, our this Northeast Minister Kana, it is right. So, he has said that CBI is no longer caged parrot. So, he reacts to CBI. Right. So, this is trigger, let's say that. The trigger can be speech given by any person, let's say. So, a speech can be a trigger point. Means where first time it triggers, yes, we should make a policy regarding this. It can be by the government agenda, it can be by a speech of someone, it can be by civil society, it can be any incident that has happened, it can be civil society protest. Means so many things are happening in society, they can force the government to think that you should make policy for this. That is called agenda setting. Once agenda setting is there, so government will proceed. Government will proceed. The government, what government will do? Proceed. The government proceed once there is a trigger and it takes into consideration. Many a time it can make news, many a time it will not make news. Many a time government will tell it is considering policy. Many a time it will not tell you. You will come to know only when government has the proposal for decision, like say demonetization. One night let's say that only we came to know when 8 o'clock Prime Minister addresses the nation. तो लोगों को क्या था, कोई ऑफिस में है, कोई रास्ते में है. So we do not know, but then he addresses, right? So that is how government may communicate, government may not communicate, but it proceeds. And then when it proceeds, it can, let's say that it proceeds, it has its own ministry, departments, they will draft. It has Niti Aayog, a specialized body. It can be asked. It can ask to, in summary, let's say in brief, non-state actors. Non-state actors means business sector and civil society, media, interest group, pressure groups, all. It can ask this, or it can set a committee. Generally it happens that committee is set up. No. Committee, commission can be set up. Now, even if let's say that they report, even if they report back, report, recommend, government still may not take a decision. No, government will not take a still, may or may not. So, agenda setting is the stage where we try to deliberate, discuss, and let's say that come to a decision final whether we have to make a policy or we do not have to make a policy. No. This. Once, let's say that government decides, yes, we should make policy. Right. Then policy will be drafted by government ministry, departments. Law Commission has recommended Uniform Civil Code. Now suppose government decide to bring Uniform Civil Code. So who will go? Who will draft? It will be a ministry. A ministry will draft it. Right. Now it can be a policy you can draft. You can draft a policy, you can draft rules, you can draft bills. Largely 3 categories we can have. No. You can frame guidelines can be also like rules, policy. Either you can go for drafting a policy, it can go for drafting rules, or it can go for drafting bills. The bills are drafted, so they will go to Parliament. Right. Both will be approved by Cabinet, and then it will be adopted. So there is domination of government, and at this level also they will have lots of consultation. At drafting level also, there will be lots of consultation, and it is not necessary that Law Commission has recommended any. It is drafted by Ministry Department. Niti Aayog can also draft it. Advisory Council can also draft it. RTI bill. Okay. So basically this is what it happens at agenda setting level. Means agenda setting is that if anything has been triggered, that has set an agenda, means need for policy making. Agenda setting is that we feel a need for policy making. Need for policy making. And once it is made, this is a policy making, this is agenda setting. This stage was agenda setting, and this stage is policy making. There is a difference between agenda setting and policy making. Can we say? No. Isn't it? Agenda setting is before policy making. Policy making will be done by largely government. This is agenda setting. Once agenda is set, let's say we have given example that government decides to make a policy, then it will ask for drafting that policy. See, Law Commission is not to draft Uniform Civil Code. Law Commission is to decide should we have Uniform Civil Code or not. This. And that recommendation will result into formulation. That recommendation may result into formulation. Let's say Niti Aayog various reports. The various reports submitted by Niti Aayog, they are agenda setting or policy making? Agenda setting. Because the reports will not be policy. Reports will become basis for adopting policy, drafting policy. That's why its reports are agenda setting. Right. So reports are made, and then policy making will come. Formally we will talk policy making, but this is how the agenda setting, let's say that we say, and that is how their government can take a decision ki yes, we should make a policy like this. And once it takes a decision ki we should make policies, it can, let's say, set up a committee, it can ask a research institution, it can ask a departmental body to look into this. Right. So it is still not formulating policy. It is that we will look into the possibility. And then they will look into the possibility of formulating a policy, rules or guideline, bills. And then they will recommend back to the government ki yes, a bill can be drafted, a law can be drafted, rules can be drafted. This, and then let's say that ki after that recommendation, after that stage when government takes ki yes, now we will make policy, it goes to policy making stage. Agenda setting stage ends. Right.
So that yes or no is included agenda setting or not?
Yes, yes.
Government yes or no for a policy?
Policy. It is, let's say that agenda setting ends with that. Right. This is how, and policy making begins. Right. When government decides that we should go for formulating a policy on this, the role of agenda setting ends there. Now agenda has said that policy will be made.
And sir, government says to law commission or other institution to make or draft a report or policy, a draft. So that is also government agenda.
Right. Now it is not government agenda, it has come in the government agenda. Try to understand, government can have two types of agendas. One, that it has already adopted agenda, as in electoral democracy. Every party has its own agenda. Right. That
Every party will not work on every agenda
that is how it is. You have to understand that they have their own agenda first. When they come to power, then they can get new agendas also. Right. New agendas can be because of many developments in society. Let's say COVID crisis has come. So when COVID crisis has come, it has forced the government to adopt different policies, isn't it? But they may not be in the agenda of the government. The government agenda, for one is the defined agenda they have. Second is the undefined upcoming agendas they have because of many developments in society. This way we can say. Right. So they are also agenda, part of agenda. Right. Agenda setting is the stage where we try to deliberate that should we make a policy for this or not. Once we have deliberated, then it reaches to the policy making stage if we want to formulate policy. Right.
agenda setting means with so many agenda we decide on some agenda that we are going to formulate a policy.
It is one aspect. Agenda setting means that government can have hundreds of agendas, but it may decide to formulate only on 10. But all hundreds are also agenda, part of its agenda. But it has decided to formulate only on 10. So that is called agenda setting. Something may have triggered that they would only formulate on 10. But if they are not formulating on 90, that is also, let's say, that part of the agenda, and as we have told that public policy is what governments choose to do and not to do. If governments do not adopt some policies, so they are also working as a guideline. But that you will understand later. I will tell later. First, we understand policy aspect which we are adopting. Right. So again, we will repeat that agenda setting deals with the stage where we try to deliberate should we make a policy or not. That is triggered by government itself agendas, or it can be by non-state actors and various other such developments. Right? Can we say? Yes. So this line you write, therefore.
And sir, all policies are of legal effect or they can be?
No. Policy is, let's say that policy is not binding. Any policy when we adopt, let's say national health policy, it is not a law. Only laws are binding. Only law have binding force, because law is a specific statement of policy. Policy is a general statement, like say national health policy. It is not binding. But it is a general guideline that by this 2022 we can say, or let's say sustainable development goals. So by 2030 we have to achieve such goals. But they are not legally binding documents. Rules and laws are enforceable. This you should know that. When law is enacted, because it is written in that, the law comes into effect. So rules and law, they have binding nature, but policy does not have a binding nature. Okay. Therefore, agenda setting is about deliberating on whether a policy decision should be taken or not. whether a policy decision should be taken or not. Once it is decided that a policy should be made, then it goes to policy making stage. Then it goes to policy making stage. So are you able to understand? Should we go to next?
Yes, sir.
So let's take this policy making. Policy making. In reverse, you will understand this. Let's say this, right? If still some doubts remains, I guess by tomorrow you will be able to understand, right? In reverse. Because level of knowledge, let's say when we say, so when we'll explain everything, let's say policy making, and then we'll talk about models of policy making, and so I guess then by the time you'll start understanding this. Yes. This is how you are understanding. This is what you are saying. Even if government has not made it, no, but government decisions are guided by that. Right? It is not necessary कि एक policy आपने adopt किया है, कई बार policy कुछ और है, decision कुछ और है. Isn't it? You should know that कि जैसे lateral entry है. तो गवर्नमेंट ने राज्यसभा को, गवर्नमेंट ने पार्लियामेंट में रिप्लाई दिया कि इट हैज नो पॉलिसी टू ब्रिंग लेटरल एंट्री, और पता चला 1 साल के बाद लेटरल एंट्री आ गया. दिस तो मेनी टाइम लेट्स से गवर्नमेंट कैन अडॉप्ट समथिंग एल्स और कैन हैव दिस, बट इट मे एंड अप डूइंग समथिंग एल्स. दैट कैन आल्सो बी. मेनी टाइम यू आर नॉट गाइडेड बाय लॉ, यू आर गाइडेड बाय गॉड. राइट. नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज. राइट. So how you are guided, let's say, how you are guided, there is policy, let's say constitution. This is what we have to understand basically, the policy and various its aspects. So government, present government or any government decisions are guided by their agendas and ideology. This is how I can say. So, and even if they have not formulated a policy, but they will protect. Let's say that we may not have a national level cow protection law. We may not have national level cow protection law, but central government gives support to states if they are they have the measures related to cow protection. There is no policy, government has no, but it is part of its agenda. This. So that way we can consider. States have adopted, state specifics they have adopted anti-cow slaughter law, but not all states have adopted. So it is part of the agenda, even if there is no policy, but it is it is working like a policy. Yes, agenda may not bring rules necessarily. When agenda will bring rules, they are policies. This. Constitution is a policy also, right? It is a law also, right? It is rules also. आप कुछ भी बोल सकते हैं उसको, but in formal language it is a legal document because it is adopted as a law. We adopted it as a law. So Constitution has a legal orientation. That's why some of the sections are directly enforceable. Fundamental rights. They are enforceable. This way you can see that. So it is a legal document. It is not rules. It is not, let's say that policy. It is a legal document in a very specific way if you want to. Right. But Constitution in broader aspect, if you see, broader blueprint it is, a broad guideline it is. In generic way we can say it is guideline or rules. Right. But proper way to tell Constitution is a legal document which deals with machineries of the government. let's write policy making. Policy making. Once agenda is set, done, it goes to policy making stage. Policy making stage. At this stage, since political executive has its own think tank. Political executive has its own think tank. Known as secretariats, including Niti Aayog. They are given task of framing policies. At this stage, the government can hold consultations with state and non-state actors, including independent research institutions, so that it is able to draft a good policy. It can be a policy draft. Next, a draft for rules, guidelines. Next, a draft for bills. At this stage, there is also defined process for consultation, formulation, approval and adoption. Like generally, the drafts would be approved by cabinet. Then it becomes policy or rules. In case of bills, it must be passed by legislature. At this stage, committees of legislature also play important role. That is, at policy making level, government institutions like political executive, its staff agencies, and legislature play important role, which can be also considered as exercise of authority. Because without government approval or bills approved by legislature, A policy will not be adopted. A policy will not be adopted. That's why David Easton defined. That's why David Easton defined authoritative allocation of values. Authoritative allocation of values. Are you able to understand? This authoritative allocation of values means सब कुछ हो जाए लेकिन जब तक गवर्नमेंट डिसीजन नहीं होगा पॉलिसी नहीं होगी. The government has the authority to take a decision. Non-state actors, no any other actors have authority to take decision, and hence it would not be a public policy. That's why public policy is defined in terms of decision making. That public policy is what governments choose to do and not to do. Or when David Easton says that, so it is about authoritative allocation of policy. Authoritative allocation of values means resources. The authoritative here is government decision or legislature approval. If a bill is introduced in legislature, legislature does not approve it, it will not become a law. And similarly, if government, everything has happened, but then it is put before cabinet and cabinet refuses to approve, it will not become a policy. So that is what authoritative allocation. This we can say. And that is how the difference between agenda setting and policy making. Agenda setting is part of policy making. This you should know that. But it is before policy making. It is a stage before policy making. Policy making itself involves different processes. Consultation, deliberation, discussion, reports, analysis, because you are finally drafting a bill. So you have to draft by taking different things into consideration. Right. So that's why let's say that policy making will involve various other within that processes, and that is how we can consider. So are you able to distinguish between agenda setting and policy making? Agenda.
Sir, policy making start with yes of the government, right?
Yes. Because जब तक गवर्नमेंट yes नहीं बोलेगी फिर कैसे प्रोसीड करेंगे? But when government say yes, it is still not a policy. It is a decision to frame policy. And when policy is framed and then government says yes, now it has become policy. Isn't it? Is it? Can we say? जैसे कि अभी गवर्नमेंट ने ड्रोन से क्या है, किस चीज से रिलेटेड, ड्रोन कैसे रेगुलेशन लाया है, कुछ रेगुलेशन ड्रोन रिलेटेड, हाँ ड्रोन रिलेटेड तो बिल है ये. दिस इज कॉल्ड blockchain, and there is one more technology which is the government has not yet formulated any policy. Finance ministry decided no, abhi nahi formulate karenge, it is not right time. Cryptocurrency, that example you can give. So cryptocurrency related, government has not yet taken policy decision. There is cryptocurrency, but as far as policy is concerned, so you do not have policy. And why government has not adopted a policy? Because it is a dynamic sector, emerging sector. Turkey has adopted a policy related to this, right? Or some one, two more countries. So very few countries have adopted a still policy because it is still emerging thing. Right? So that is what you have to have. Means let's say that the field of public policy demands lots of examples, different types of examples. That's why we teach in the end, since everything is taught. So we don't have to explain legislature, we don't have to explain Niti Ayog, right? So that is the purpose, means why we teach as a last chapter, because of this. so that you know everything. So it demands examples, and if you do not have right example, it will be difficult to explain. Right. This. Similarly, agenda setting difference and policy making. The Niti Aayog submits several reports. It can be the best example. The Niti Aayog has reports, various reports. Right. Reports can be related to various indices, or already we have told reports related to this innovation, reports related to outcome busting, outcome busting. ये क्या है? ये रिपोर्ट्स है, एजेंडा सेटिंग. They may set agenda to review policy, adopt new policy. But Niti Aayog, same Niti Aayog has submitted report which are policy. Can we say? Right. First is National Development Agenda. National Development Agenda is a policy. Then we have this called, let's say that, roadmap. Roadmap for performance and outcome busting. It or right. Anyhow, so this is how, let's say that, you can understand. Is it clear? Are you able to understand? So different types of, yes,
And if we don't have that data like in cryptocurrency, so it is difficult to formulate.
yes.
It is like Simon non-programming.
Yes. Non-programmed decision making. So that is how techniques are used to enhance rationality in policy making. And there are various models, evidence-based policy making also we say, big data analysis, so which we'll talk gradually in other, let's say when we'll talk. So there is big data nowadays, big data analysis we have, evidence-based policy making we have. We'll try to learn from various models of public policy. तो उससे भी हम, जैसे आज के डेट में जब हम पॉलिसी बनाते हैं ना, तो फील्ड पब्लिक पॉलिसी हैज ऑलरेडी ग्रोन अप. द फील्ड ऑफ पब्लिक पॉलिसी हैज ऑलरेडी ग्रोन अप. तो हमारे पास वो सारा लिटरेचर है ना, जो पॉलिसी मेकर्स हैं, दे शुड बी अवेयर अबाउट दिस. इसीलिए इफ यू रिमेंबर वी टोल्ड दैट कि पॉलिसी लेवल ट्रेनिंग इज गिवन टू सिविल सर्वेंट 16-17 years इन सर्विस ट्रेनिंग. In service training is policy level training. And those who are in think tank, let's say, that they will understand all this. They know about incremental, rational. Right? Means it's not that they are applying the theory, but they know it. Today means when we'll teach you, you will also know it. Right? Political science also they know it. That's why let's say that those who are research institutions, the research institutions will try to have, so there is now inbuilt process. Means society has grown in such a way that there is inbuilt process to draft policies which can be objective and better. They will go through various stages. Data gathering, information, try to look into any other country whether there is similar policy, like say cryptocurrency related. If any country has adopted, so they may study that, they may look into that. This So that can be. Recently, yesterday I was watching one video by क्या है Kotak no Kotak Anand Mahindra. Anand Mahindra, he keeps posting Twitter वगैरह, isn't it? So he posted one South Korea transportation system of South Korea, right? And he tagged Nitin Gadkari that we should also think of this. So basically, they have constructed their roads and lanes, and they have also constructed for cycle wala also. And the video is showing that कि how the smooth, कोई किसी दूसरे के लेन में नहीं जा रहा है. Basically, this is what it shows. कि nobody, a car wala is also moving in particular lane, so car wala also goes in that lane only. Right. The video is showing that कि they may have taken from, let's say that कि this with what we can say drones. Right. So it is showing that how the smooth movement, and there is no any, let's say the way it happens in our country, right? कि आप इस लेन में चल रहे हो तो इधर से जो आएगा ना वो इधर से आके यहाँ आ जाएगा, ठीक है? This. So he told that we should also work on that. So now it can be a trigger point. It can be agenda triggering. Nitin Gadkari, this you can say that he is known for love, right? So this can be a trigger point, let's say, best practice. So we try to learn from best practice, either as a trigger point, और यह हो सकता है कि नितिन गडकरी जो है he is drafting a policy, लेकिन उनको ये आइडिया है कि नहीं हमें बेस्ट पॉलिसी ड्राफ्ट करना है. तो बेस्ट पॉलिसी कैसे ड्राफ्ट करेंगे? तो वी हैव टू लुक इनटू अदर this. Whether there is any other, that is called benchmarking. Right. So this is what it involves. It can be agenda setting stage, it can be policy making stage. But policy making stage is the drafting stage. Why drafting stage? Because now when you have to implement policy, so drafting stage demands that you should have gone into all the aspects of policy. Right. Law Commission may not look into uniform civil code, feasibility, this and that, how to implement, what should be exactly in uniform civil code. It is looking into just feasibility, होना चाहिए कि नहीं होना चाहिए, hurdles क्या है, किसने क्या बोला. तो दूसरे Law Commission will talk to different communities, let's say Muslims, Christians, Hindu, and others, and then you will try to look into the possibility whether society is prepared. It is not concerned about nitty-gritty what should be the uniform civil code. That is when you go for drafting stage. That's why agenda setting stage is different, drafting stage is different, policy making stage is different, this we say. And once it has been drafted, then decision making means the government will have to take a decision. If it does not take decision, it remains as a bill. Several bills we tell that they have not been adopted. No, we have told that they have not been adopted. But they also work as guideline. We suggest often judicial standards and accountability bill. So we say it should be adopted. Right. We say civil service code should be adopted. Even if government has not adopted new civil service code, but it is trying to implement this or that way. That's why Thomas Dye was also right to say that public policy means what governments choose to do, not to do. But not to do wala, we are not focusing at this stage mode. First we are trying to understand this. So this is how you can say that. Delhi High Court asked government on its view on marital rape, and government has not taken any stand or policy decision. Can we highlight it as an example? It can be considered as not to do. Means we do not have any decision on that. Yes, it can be taken as example, depending where you want to give this example. Right. So let's take next policy implementation. They means hereafter means it is not difficult. The first two stages are difficult. First two stages are difficult. First two stages we have to study in public policy. Thereafter already we have discussed about bureaucracy, this and that, isn't it? Monitoring evaluation चूँकि हमारे देश में होता नहीं है तो वो important नहीं है. This, मतलब UPSC focuses more on agenda setting level and policy making level. Implementation also it focuses, it is not as challenging because you know about implementation. The most of the models will teach you that they will deal at, the most of the models which will teach, they will deal at agenda setting level or policy making level. This, thereafter it is not as challenging. So let's write. Policy implementation. Once policy is made, then it is the responsibility of bureaucracy. It is the responsibility of bureaucracy to implement policy. Implement policy. That is the primary role of bureaucracy or administration. The primary role of bureaucracy or administration. Bureaucracy or administration is to implement policy. Implement policy. For effective implementation of policy, there are also models of policy implementation. Models of policy implementation. Like top-down model, top-down, bottom-up, and hybrid model. Hybrid model. This. At this stage, 1980s onwards, there is also greater role of civil society and business sector. That there is governance approach and public-private partnership. Hence, the role of administration has reduced. In policy implementation. And there is greater participation of people. Although the role of administration has increased in policy regulation. Next, monitoring. While policy is under implementation, there is monitoring, also known as supervision. By the government departments, especially executive agencies. Executive agencies are responsible for policy supervision. Technology has also helped effective supervision. Like effective supervision, like effective supervision, like MIS, GIS, MIS, the GIS, and other such application of ICT. Civil society and media also. Civil society and media also monitor implementation through their reports time to time. Next, evaluation and feedback. Okay. That evaluation and feedback. After implementation of policy, it is evaluated, which serves as feedback. It is done by both government and both state and non-state actors. State and non-state actors. Like government reviews policy implementation through first annual reports, economic survey, review of monetary policy every quarter, Next, Niti Aayog reports through indices. Non-state actors like research institutions, media, civil society. For instance, National Council for Applied Economic Research, TIS, Center for Policy Research, World Bank, IMF, World Economic Forum, civil society like MKSS, Oxfam, Pratham, etc. Like Pratham Asar report, ASER, report on school education in India. Next. Such reports work as feedback for policy review. Which becomes basis for first, either bringing change in policy, next, or abolition of policy, next, or drafting a new policy. For instance, restructuring of centrally sponsored schemes. Is based on feedback feedback and reports. Discontinuity of 5-year plan. Next, adoption of new development agenda. Change the paragraph. Therefore, that's why it is said. Policy making, policy implementation, and policy evaluation are interlinked and is continuous process. It is difficult to separate them. It is difficult to separate one from another. And hence it is also difficult to separate administration from politics. That is, the field of public policy, the emergence of field of public policy has helped in proper understanding of relationship between politics and administration. And both are embedded. That's why policy implementation effectiveness depends on policy formulation, and policy formulation depends on effectiveness of policy implementation. And that's why field of public policy has become a field of public administration. Field of public policy has become field of public administration. In nutshell, it is the policy process consisting of 5 stages mentioned above, ultimately determine how good policy a state has, and how effective policy is implemented. It also shows that a state should have public policy ecosystem. Which should consist of its government-owned institutions, So first is government institution that has given rise to institutional model, which we'll talk you later. So first circle is about government institution, organs of the state. It is government, judiciary, legislature, secretariats, and other government like say Niti Aayog, etc., ministry departments. The second layer will consist of non-state actors, you can say, and people, etc., like business sector, research bodies, civil society, right, pressure groups, but no need to write all these things. Means you can write pressure groups, right, interest groups, sectors, and supra is by outside the country. No. अब इसमें एक ब्यूरोक्रेसी एक उसमें एक ब्यूरोक्रेसी छोटा सा इंस्टीट्यूशन है, बट इट इज सच ए बिग इंस्टीट्यूशन, राइट. मतलब पॉलिसी बनाने के लिए एक इकोसिस्टम होना चाहिए, मतलब पॉलिसी बनाने के लिए, पॉलिसी इंप्लीमेंट करने के लिए, दोनों. You can make good policy, you can have good implementation, so it should have an ecosystem. And that is how the ecosystem you can find that. Okay. Now how good secretariats are, how good research institutions are, isn't it? These things matter. Okay. How better research institutions we have, how effective, already we have taught about secretariat, okay, how better research they do. This, let's say that. Then legislature, executive functioning. So that's why policy making, policy implementation, both are embedded. This you should know that. When we say that, embedded. So if it is policy making, it is policy implementation. Both are embedded. इसलिए कि पॉलिसी जैसे आप देख लो कि हमारे पास क्रिप्टो करेंसी का नहीं है कुछ इस तरह का इम्प्लीमेंटेशन का, तो वी आर इन अ वैक्यूम, देयर इज अ वैक्यूम. द पॉलिसी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन विल एलिमिनेट दैट काइंड ऑफ वैक्यूम. Once we will adopt a policy, we will wait for its implementation. Many a time we say that government should let's see how government implements, then we will try to become very harsh on that. So implementation, let's say. So implementation becomes basis for further policy making. So things will be in cycle, in continuous process. 5-year plan, we left National Development Agenda. The National Development Agenda is based on 60 years of our 5-year plan system. This Niti Aayog is created on the basis of Planning Commission. Planning Commission नहीं होता तो नीति आयोग भी नहीं होता. Right. Because we will not know the weaknesses of Planning Commission. So we will not know weaknesses of Planning Commission. So we will not improve Niti Aayog. This. So that's why let's say that past is important to understand so that we can improve present and future. This feedback.
After you said that policy making and policy implementation are interrelated, from this how do we conclude that politics and administration are embedded?
Yes, because implementation is the primary responsibility of administration and policy making is the primary responsibility of politics.
In policy making also,
No, they have the role, but basically since decision is taken by the elected government, because of that we say that it's main role of politics. Policy making has a political character, but policy implementation has administrative character. This we can say.
Sir, civil society participate in both.
Yes, both stages they will participate.
Distinction between
Yes, they will have, let's say they are also continuously monitoring it. Let's say Manrega, civil society is monitoring it continuously. That's why time to time they will give report. And their report become basis for improvement. Right, this.
So civil society also make policy
Yes, we can say that, but that is not an important thing. That is not an important thing to talk and write, because this is how civil society organization. So should we take next? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So let's take next. So hope it may have brought some understanding about public policy. Means no, right. By the time we'll take theory, so I guess then you'll understand more. Then I guess when we'll take differences between objectives, aims, planning, policy making, decision making, because a question is asked or expected on decision making, policy making difference. UPSC conceptual questions, they can be asked. Conceptual sharpness should be there. We'll come to that. Let's write then on models of policy making. Models of public policy. Basically, they are the models of policy making. एजेंडा सेटिंग के लिए भी पॉलिसी मॉडल्स हैं, बट पहले वो बताना ठीक नहीं है. मीन्स इट इज़ नॉट नेसेसरी. मीन्स इट इज़ नॉट, इट विल बी डिफिकल्ट टू टेल एट दैट स्टेज, राइट. तो फर्स्ट लेट्स स्टार्ट अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑन दिस. Let us see that what they have asked are most important. So, this, 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 this. Plus this combined they framed a question combining is a macro question, rationalist and incrementalist paradigm. The rest are respected. It is a matter of time कि they will ask, they will not ask. Among them, the most important question they ask again and again is this. Most of the time, it is drawer model. If you read questions, you will find that largely they ask. Then second most is this, Lindblom model. Lindblom is another popular thinker. In question paper, you will have Lindblom or this, we say Wildwesky or Waldo. This, so often it has been seen that they will find either one presence in question paper. Now, in this, the most expected means what mostly we expect which question they can ask. See, since rational model and public choice model already they are part of first chapter, second chapter, so it is not, let's say, they are asking. We expect, let's say that further we expect those means further we expect this model, drawn model and this model. Again the repetition, because largely they repeat and keep asking. They have not asked others, which shows that the high possibility, that means in public policy you must master on Lindblom, Drawer and Vickers model. This is how it is. Then others are just, they can again ask, we expected question can be this black box system model. It can be one expected question. This is also expected question. We had been expecting this also, everything, then we can go right. But we have been expecting this question. Punctuated equilibrium model. It is system model of public policy. The way we have organization theory, classical approach, human relation behavioral approach, and then system approach. Similarly, in public policy, it is classical approach, human relation behavioral approach, and it is system approach. Integrated. It is integrated, we have written integrated paradigm. Hence, this is a very recognized contemporary public policy model, which they have not asked. They have not as much recognition as this punctuated equilibrium model. So we have been expecting a question on that also.
This is the latest.
Yes, yes.
Sir, that Vickers model is of which type?
Largely it will fall in incremental category. Incremental model. But it is difficult to club since he gave criticizing Right. So he criticizes the rationalist also. This. So it can have mix of both that way. Now let's say that these models, you can see that how many models are there to explain public policy. Right. Anyhow, they are not, let's say that we have given a supplement, separate supplement we give on public policy issues, in which some models will be given. In printed notes, they may not be, they may not have, but we give a separate public policy related, or I guess we have incorporated in the printed notes itself. So yes, we have incorporated in printed notes, I guess. So it is given, let's say, so we do not give more focus on this. We teach those things which are asked, let's say, that we focus more. Plus we give a macro view of this, basically what it is. Basically, let's say that when the field of public policy emerged, or a policy science emerged during 1940s, 50s, thereafter, hence thinkers started talking about that, how policy can be improved, means how we can make good policy. How we can make good policy. So this school of thought looks into how policy is made. They analyze this. If we understand how policy is made, so we can understand the problems of policy. And once we can understand the problems of policy making, so accordingly we can improve policy. Then they will analyze how policy is made, and then they say that since there is a policy constraint, so since policy constraint is there, that's why we cannot make very good policy. We can just simply improve policy here and there, that is called incremental improvement we can bring. Hence it is, that's why incrementalist model we say that, and it is against rationalist model. It is a critic to rationalist model, and it says that policy can be only, let's say that we can improve as we have told in budget. So this will say that we can incrementally you can improve policy. And it gives descriptive analysis why it happens. It has descriptive analysis of policy making, means it analyzes how policy is made. And when it analyzes how policy is made, so it will have, let's say that explanation also that what are the constraints of policy making, due to which policy remains incremental. Like say suppose you are asked to analyze farms bill. Let's say the farm bills that government has introduced, adopted, etc. Or suppose present government policy making you analyze for 6-7 years. So then you can have descriptive analysis. Two approach you. Either you can have descriptive analysis how government has made policy so far, what are the policy constraints it has faced, and then whether it has been able to design radical policy or incremental policy. They focus on not on that how policy is made. Their focus is that how policy can be improved. How can we improve policy? So where incremental ends, there they start. Their main role is how we can improve policy, not how policy is made. And their aim is to improve how policy can be improved. So it means they will focus on we can make good policy. We can make best policy. That's why let's say that rational comprehensive model. Rational comprehensive means we can make the best policy, or we can make the most comprehensive policy. Or this is called optimal rational model. The optimal rational means again it is maximum, let's say that. How we can make the best policy, or how government can make best policy. Therefore focus will be on that. Similarly, optimal Pareto optimality you may have heard in your economy. The Pareto optimality is also a kind of perfect distribution of goods and services. How the state can have perfect distribution or optimal distribution. So their focus is that how policy can be improved. this, and they will be then critic to each other. Therefore, by both, let's say, understanding, will understand that what are the policy constraints and how we can improve policy constraints. So, policy constraints we can understand that since there are multiple players in our society, state cannot take unilateral decisions. This state cannot take unilateral decisions, and therefore, let's say policy will be incremental. This, they both will have their pros and cons and etc. etc. which will let's take tomorrow. We'll try to further explain it. We'll finish here. Yes, next thing is that we can start a bit early, right? Yes, means generally I used to come late, but let's keep, means at 8 o'clock we will start. First, let's promise. Right. So you be present at 8 o'clock, because nowadays I come early. Right. It has started ki now I have to basically drop my daughter to school. It used to be 2 years back, so that's why I used to come on time. But for 2 years I struggled. So since her school time is 7:30, so we just on the way I drop, come to office. So I come here. So 8 o'clock we can have. Right.
Sir, what is disproportionate application of force?
डिसप्रपोर्शनेट एप्लीकेशन ऑफ फोर्स मीन्स कि मान लो प्रोटेस्टर्स हैं, तो प्रोटेस्टर्स जो है वो उनके हाथ में स्टोन है, तो बहुत है तो स्टोन से आपको इंजर कर सकते हैं, स्टोन से किसी का जान नहीं ले सकते हैं, और आपने उनको फायर कर दिया उनके ऊपर, ठीक है, तो ये डिसप्रपोर्शनेट होगा, इससे डेथ हो जाता है. मतलब कि क्राउड कितना थ्रेटनिंग है. राइट. जैसे कि एक महाराष्ट्र का केस है कि महाराष्ट्र में एक बिहार का एक लड़का था. महाराष्ट्र एंटी बिहारी ये सब जब चलता था, आज से 10 साल पहले की बात है. तो एक स्टूडेंट था, वो कुछ इशू चल रहा था बिहारी और महाराष्ट्र, तो बस में क्या किया कि उसके पास वो कंट्री मेड गन होता है, उसके पास एक कंट्री मेड गन था जिसको कट्टा बोलते हैं, वो चलता भी नहीं है ठीक से, और बस में क्या किया कि हॉस्टेज बना लिया. एक ही लड़का था स्टूडेंट. पुलिस गई और पुलिस ने उसको शूट कर दिया. ठीक है, इट इज डिसप्रोपोर्शनेट यूज ऑफ फोर्स. राइट. सो वो उसके पास आपको पता है कि कट्टा है, कट्टा कितना फायर करेगा, कंट्री मेड गन है ना, और वो स्टूडेंट है, वो प्रोफेशनल शूटर नहीं है, वो क्रिमिनल नहीं है, तो पुलिस के पास और कोई चीज़ आता नहीं है. हमने आपको एक यूएस का कहानी शेयर किया था कि एक व्हीकल को ट्रैक कर रही है पुलिस, शेयर किया था, और 5 पुलिस व्हीकल है, 8 पुलिस व्हीकल है, 8 पुलिस व्हीकल एक व्हीकल को ट्रैक कर रहे हैं, और किसी को उन्होंने शूट नहीं किया, और कितने लंबे दूरी तक वो ट्रैक करते हैं उसको, और उनके पास टैक्टिक्स है कि कैसे उसको वो मतलब हाउ दे विल स्टॉप दैट कार, हाउ दे विल कन्विंस देम सो दैट दे कम आउट, सो दैट वी डोंट हैव टू फायर. ठीक है, और फायर नहीं करते हैं. इसका मतलब होता है वी द पीपल ऑफ, पीपल का मतलब होता है, सॉरी टू से दैट. राइट. मतलब आपको अपने देश के नागरिक को रिस्पेक्ट करना होगा, ये नहीं कि वो प्रोटेस्टर है तो शूट कर दो उसको. राइट. दिस इज व्हाट डिसप्रोपोर्शन. Yes, it is part of judicial. Right.
सर आपने बताया कि जब पब्लिक प्रोसिक्यूटर या चार्जशीट फाइल हो जाती है उसके बाद पुलिस का रोल एंड हो जाता है, तो सर उसके बाद सारा काम पब्लिक प्रोसिक्यूटर कैसे करेगा? वो जुडिशियल फंक्शनरी है.
जुडिशियल फंक्शनरी है जो वो हेल्प करता है जुडिशरी को, केस को परस्यू करता है फर्दर, उसका इंटरेक्शन होता है पुलिस के साथ, ऐसा नहीं है, पुलिस और प्रोसिक्यूटर के साथ इंटरेक्शन होता है, बट पब्लिक प्रोसिक्यूटर ही रिप्रेजेंट करता है। Yes, because criminal offense is against state. That's why public prosecutor का होना जरूरी है. Right. Okay.